It's great to see you. Good morning. Welcome in. We're in the book of Revelation, which naturally means we're talking about the Beatitudes of Jesus, right? I hope you've been thinking about this over the last week. There are 8 Beatitudes of Christ found in which book and chapter of the Bible? Matthew. It's funny, we always say that one. We don't refer to the other gospel accounts, do we? But good. Very good. Matthew, the 5th chapter, and that same lesson continues on into chapter 6 and actually as well into 7 in the great Sermon on the Mount. Some consider it the greatest sermon ever preached. With it being the Lord and everything contained, I would not argue with that assessment. I would think that might very well be the case. So let's turn to Matthew chapter 5, since we're in the book of Revelation, right? Makes perfect sense. Matthew 5, Beatitudes. New life. Very good. Okay. Because after 7, you're starting over again, perhaps? Perfection, and then start over, repeat the process. Very good. All right, so new life is suggested, and let's talk about beatitude. What exactly is a beatitude? An attitude you need to be. I like looking at it that way. It's actually very fitting. I'm sorry. A good word? Okay, nice. Couldn't disagree with that. Mr. Etymology, what do you have for us? Very good. The only time I've heard or even found its usage is in biblical application. And maybe that's why. Maybe the Bible's been set aside for a little bit too long. But yeah, so I was looking at it and I was like you, I found some background in Middle English, Latin, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, beatitudo, something like that. And yeah, the idea of it is blessedness. Maybe a better way to understand it for us is happiness. But it's to like an infinite degree. It's elated or supreme happiness, which I find very fitting for what it is that we're seeking in life. We want to be a happy people, and we want to find joy that is unending to the nth degree. So how exactly is it that we locate that? Well, Jesus gives us the key to the fullest happiness that can never be taken away from you. And so let's look at these together just to refresh ourselves as we get into this discussion of the Beatitudes today. Matthew chapter 5, in the first verse, and seeing the multitudes, it's like a lot of people want to hear about this. He went up on a mountain, so he ascends to a high place. Keep that in mind. And when he was seated in this high place, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed. And what this means is, to the nth degree of happiness are those who are poor. What? I thought the key to finding happiness in life was to have the most you could possibly attain and to be rich. Poor, low, little. Notice though, not in economics, but in what? In spirit. What do you think the significance of spirit is? What's the significance of your spirit? Spirit is who a person really is. It's you, it's your true self. So if someone is poor in spirit, what are they? Literally. They are less, little, or empty of self. And what are some other words we can plug in for this? If you're empty of yourself, what are you? These are positive characteristics. You're selfless. Very good. That one. A lot of times we hear something else, which is very fitting. Go ahead. Right. Yeah. So we are selfless. We're humble. That's the one we often hear with it, which is a great term for it. But I really like the selfless. We're just empty of ourselves. So what's the key to happiness in life? It's the opposite of what you would think, isn't it? You would feel like I should chase everything that makes me happy, everything that I like and everything that I want. But the reality is that's just a way to find misery that never ends. The best way to find happiness, and that happiness will never leave you, is to be void of self. Empty yourself of self-interests. All right, and there's a promise attached to each one of these. So blessed are the selfless or the humble, For theirs is. Now, we'll see a future tense verb on most of these, but for this one, it's the present. Even right here, right now, you can attain maximum happiness. And here's why, because you're a part of the most special thing in existence on this earth. Theirs is, right now in this life, the kingdom of heaven. Or you get to be a part of the only nation that really matters. Verse 4, blessed are those who mourn. Now that's somewhat ironic. Well, typically, why are you crying? You're sad, which is the opposite of happiness. The key to finding happiness that never ends is you first need to be filled with sadness. That is not what you would think. But do we find happiness that never ends simply by becoming sad? Let's say that I break a bone and I cry. Okay, now do I have permanent happiness? I'm sick and I hurt, so I cry. Now do I have joy unending? The closest person to me in my life passes away. Now I'm happy, right? It's not just that you mourn and over common things that happen. What do you think this mourning would be over? There you go. A mourning that leads to joy unending is a mourning over a person's sin and a willingness to change. We read in the 4th chapter of James, verse 9. This is a command from God, by the way. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. And look how the two of these concepts tie in together. The very next verse is, humble yourselves or empty yourself of self, and the Lord will lift you up or give you a high position of, guess what? Happiness and joy. But first you have to get rid of self-interest, self-pursuit. First you have to mourn over your sins and demonstrate a willingness to change. For they shall be comforted. Notice that's in the future. Might not be quite as much right now like we want, but that is a future promise. You know what the promise of God is in the book of Revelation? Chapter 21, verse 4. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain. That's future, though. For the former things, when it's all said and done, have passed away. Beatitude number 3 of the 8, verse 5. Blessed are the meek. What is it to be meek? You might have another word in yours. Gentle. So we need to be weak, don't we? Oh. But it rhymes. But that's not what it means. Okay, very good, Justin. I can't outsmart him. I try every week. So what does it mean to be meek or gentle? It's not weak. Okay, to be patient, forbearing, excuse me. Excellent. Okay, so Justin says it means to be capable of violence, coming from a soldier, but not executing that skill. So I like how to be violent is skillful. I agree. I think so too, personally. You're exactly right. I love the way you word it. Meekness is not weakness. One of my favorite descriptions, it might not be a textbook definition, but it's certainly the concept of it. One of my favorite descriptions of meekness is absolute power under perfect control. And so really it's kind of the idea of being self-controlled. And, I could be really rough in this situation, but I'm going to choose not to exercise that power that I have. You would make a lot of sense for this. I was thinking of Chad Burrow. Now listen, in the wrong place, the wrong time of life, I would not want to meet Chad Burrow in a dark alley. Okay? Now, that being said, it might sound kind of funny to a lot of you because I've never met, I feel like, a more loving male than Chad Burrow. With the kids, I've never seen a more kind, gentle person than what Chad is. I have never encountered a baby that wasn't enamored with Chad. Maybe even over any other woman. That's not something you often see in a man. But don't mistake his gentleness for weakness. This guy's no joke. All right? All-state football player, if I'm not mistaken, or up there anyway. And a soldier, second to none in the U.S. Army. A ranger. But there's all this power, and it's restrained so well that you might not even recognize just how much power really is there to be found. It's not weakness, but it's gentleness or absolute power under perfect control. Blessed are the meek who have power but who choose not to abuse it. Why is that? For they shall in the future inherit the earth. Well, we already do that now. So what's the promise contained there? What's new here, do you think? Think Revelation. What kind of earth is found by the end of the book of Revelation? John says also in chapter 21, verse 1, Now I, John, saw a new heaven and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. And so I think it's talking about the new place that God is going to prepare. There shall be the new home that God has made ready for them. Beatitude number 4. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. That's strange, because I thought I get cranky when I'm hungry and thirsty. You do? Okay, well. So what's he talking about then? How in the world are you going to be the happiest you possibly can be when you're starving and thirsting to death? Or so it feels. It's not for food. You see, every one of these is take your focus off the physical, put it on the spiritual, get away from the earth, and put your mind on the things above if you want to find genuine happiness, even here in this life. Hunger and thirst, not for food, but for righteousness. What's righteousness? Be careful. Psalm 119, 172, inspiration speaking, My tongue shall speak of your word, for all your commandments are righteousness. People who don't hunger and thirst after the material things, but after the things that God deems to be most important, and especially the things that he tells us in his word. It's like I can't get enough of it. The patriarch Job words it this way, Job 23:12. I have not departed from the commandment of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. I'm hungry and I'm thirsty for what God wants out of my life. Why is there blessing in that? The promise, for they shall be filled. They will get what it is that they want to the maximum extent. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 19 reads, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Beatitude number 5. Blessed are the merciful. Who are these people? You want to find the most amount of joy? Be merciful. It's those, Very good. There are two levels of this, really. There's more the physicality, and then there's the mentality of it. And when we're talking about mentality, absolutely, it's the forgiving. And as far as physicality, you come across people who are hurting. And there are two options in that case. Either one, I can seek joy from myself and I can just ignore that and leave them as they are, because that might bring my mood down. Or I can sacrifice some of what I would want to help these people, and believe it or not, strangely enough, that'll create an even greater mood than what you had prior, even though you might not think it to be the case. So it's to help people who are in need, A, physically, and B, especially to help people who are in need mentally, perhaps desiring and seeking after our forgiveness. Blessed are the merciful. Why is that? For they shall obtain mercy. I could say, well, I have the strength not to do that, and I'm so strong, I'm not going to give in. That doesn't exhibit strength. That exhibits weakness. That doesn't set you free. It only holds you as a prisoner in your own cell. James chapter 2, verse 13, for judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy. But for the one who has, mercy triumphs over judgment. Beatitude number 6. Blessed are the pure. Those are the ones who are innocent. How? Where? All the way down to his or her heart. Now we often focus on, we want to keep our activities clean from any sin. We want to keep our speech pure. And those things are good. We should. Where does Jesus say it all begins? On the inside. You fix the inside, and you're going to fix the outside in every way that it manifests itself. Blessed are those who are pure all the way down in their hearts, for they shall in the future see God, understanding, getting to stay with God, never having to leave his beautiful presence behind. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers. We've dealt with this recently. It's not weapons, but those do make us happy, right? Blessed are the peacemakers. These are the ones who don't instigate problems, who when they encounter problems don't encouraging their continuance, but who do what's necessary to solve problems. I like looking at it this way, that they are problem solvers, not problem makers, not problem continuers. For they shall be called sons, children of God, meaning they're like God himself. This statement is made of Jesus in Ephesians 2, verse 14. For he himself, in his person, is our peace, who has made both who are in disagreement with one another one, and has broken down the middle wall of separation. He did this between the nationalities that were so opposed to one another, and Jews and Gentiles, and he also did it with humanity and with God. So when we seek to make peace, not sow seeds of division or not continue problems that we've encountered, we are just like God himself. Verse 10, and this would be the final one, I feel like, and probably 10 through 12 here belong together. Blessed are those who are persecuted, who go through hardship, not period, but for this reason, for righteousness' sake. And we could face harsh treatment because we've committed crimes. Well, that's not what's under consideration here. It's when you do the right thing. For righteousness' sake means you followed God's commands. Remember Psalm 119, 172. And you find an unmatched happiness when you face hardship because of that. What's my reward? For theirs is, and I think this is kind of full circle right here. Notice in the beginning, there's blessing right now, and then it's future blessing, future blessing, future blessing. And then tied back in, for theirs is right now, there's even present blessing to be enjoyed in this, the kingdom of heaven. Jesus would say elsewhere, hey, even when people turn on you, you're not alone. Even if your own family turns on you, you're not alone. Look around you. You've gained 100 times more friends and family in the kingdom of God than what you had in the beginning. Continue on into verse 11. Blessed, this is a beatitude, are you when they revile, they make fun of you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely, making up lies about you for my sake. And if you look in verse 12, I think this is a really good definition of what a beatitude really is. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad. So, A, you should be extremely, not just a little bit, but ridiculously happy. And 2, you should celebrate when these bad things seemingly happen, recognizing that they're actually not bad things at all. Jesus says a servant is not above his master, John 15. They hated me, they're going to hate you. If they spoke evil against me, they're going to speak evil against you. If they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. So don't be upset when you're hated, when you're spoken evil of, when people do terrible things towards you, simply because you're following me, because that helps to identify you with me. It's not a curse, it's a blessing. A beatitude means you can be exceedingly glad and rejoice, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You get to be included in this camp of righteousness. So these are the 8 Beatitudes of Jesus, just a little refresher as we go into the little bit that we're going to be discussing today. My question to you is this, though. Why are we talking about Matthew and Beatitudes of our Lord when we're dealing with this book in Revelation about the church? Eventually it'll be the church with God, and then the church at home with God. So why are we talking about the Beatitudes of Christ that he spoke on the earth in the book of Revelation? Paul? Excellent, Paul. Now these people in Matthew 5, why do they need to learn Beatitudes, which is to be how to be extremely happy? Why do they need to learn that? Well, they're already going through a tough time of oppression with the Romans, but nothing like they're going to face at the hands of the Romans and the Jews. They're going to be given every reason to be beyond sad. Paul words it this way, to despair of life itself. This is going to be their opportunity, but they need to know that even in these conditions, they can find maximum happiness, but it's not focusing on the things in this world, and focusing what it is that God has planned for those who love him. Very good point, Paul. I believe I had a hand over here, maybe, Roy? Go ahead. Okay. All right. So, there we go. In this book, it's strange, isn't it? Yeah. Did you know there are actually Beatitudes in the book of Revelation? The same word, makarios, in Greek, which is blessed or maximum happiness, is promised to those who, ... just like those in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, before we get into these, I want to remind you of something I find kind of interesting. In the beginning of chapter 5, verse 1, when Jesus sees the multitudes, or all these people who want to learn about happiness, he goes up to a high place. He ascends up on a mountain. And then he's seated. And his disciples, they come to listen to him. What do we know is taking place by the book of Revelation in the case of Jesus? Where's Jesus now? By Revelation. Where is Jesus? He's gone to heaven, hasn't he? How did he get there? He ascended to a high place. And all these people still want to hear from Jesus. So the multitudes, if you will, his people especially, flock before him. And in what position is Jesus in that place to where he ascended? He's up high, and we're told that he's seated. I think you said this. He's seated at the right hand of God. Compare that with Matthew 5, verse 1. And seeing all these people who want to learn about happiness, especially in difficult times and persecution they're about to face, Paul, he ascends to a high place on a mountain, and he's seated, and his disciples come to him and want to hear from him. How fitting in Revelation, he's ascended to the highest place there is. His disciples are still flocking to him, wanting to hear him. And as he's seated down at the right hand of God, he begins to tell them what it takes to have happiness in this life and in the hereafter. So let's go through these 7 Beatitudes together. And I feel like for Beatitudes, it's very fitting. Okay, 8, you're starting over a new life. 7 in Revelation, 7 tells us perfection. And a beatitude means supreme happiness. And so we're looking at what it takes to find supreme happiness to the extent of perfection in this book. Beatitude number 1, chapter 1, verse 3. Who wants to tell us our memory verse? Oh, I'm sorry, please, yes. Right, and even in that prayer toward the end, forgive us our debts as we've forgiven our debtors. 14 and 15, for if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father. That's good. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I like that, Roy. Thanks. I'll have to look back over all those now with that in mind. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, so our first beatitude. What does it take to find happiness that is unparalleled? Chapter 1, verse 3. Who's going to say our memory verse? Karen. Very good. So let's break this down piece by piece. Do you realize that Revelation is unique in the Bible because it is the only book that pronounces a blessing upon the person who would simply choose to be willing to deal with its contents? Blessed or eternally happy can be the one who uses this book, who reads it. The words of joy are contained therein. Are you willing? Will you take me up on the challenge? God asks. I've heard a number of times in my life, I've never studied Revelation. And for those who have even taught Scripture for many decades, I've never taught Revelation. No, I'm not going to try that one. Almost as being too intimidated by the contents that are found therein. Look, that's an observation, not a criticism, because I'll admit to you, this is the first time I've ever taught it myself in decades of proclaiming the Word. So I guess I would be found in that category also. But I'm excited to finally dig into and unlock the blessing that is contained within it. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear. You ever read a book, and especially say like 4 or 5 pages of it, and you're like, all right, I'm going to get in 16 pages today, and you're reading through it, and half falling asleep, and you get to the end, and I did it. And if anyone were to ask you, hey, what'd you read today? You have to think about what the title of the book even is and the chapter. I mean, you didn't really take anything away from it. There's a difference in hearing or listening and simply reading something. It's reading to actually take in and to try to understand what is found on the inside. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear or listen to, really understand, work at comprehending the words of this prophecy. Recognizing what's found in it contains information about future events. How future? Remote or immediate? Well, the end of the memory verse tells us. Which one? For the time is near. Look, in Revelation, we're not mostly talking about events that are thousands of years down the line. Now, there's no question by the time you get to chapters 21 and 22, that's the end of the world about which we're talking there. That's a little more remote. But the majority of the contents of this book, they're not remote in prophecy, but they're immediate or right around the corner. The time is near, or basically right now. It's just right around the corner. So blessed are those who are willing to listen to what's taught in it. Second beatitude, boy, you're right, Roy. It's not anywhere close to the first one. We have to go way past even the middle of the book to chapter 14. Let's read together Revelation 14, and we're going to include with 13, verse 12. Revelation 14, 12, and 13. Here is the patience of the saints. That's perseverance, it's long-suffering, it's forbearance. It's those who don't quit. So this is for people who don't quit. Why do you think anyone would ever want to quit on God? Well, don't forget what these people are facing. The worst persecution, in the words of Jesus, the worst persecution the world has ever seen. And it would sound like probably or ever would see as a people. It would be easy if you're ever going to quit during this time. So here is the patience, the perseverance, the stick-to-itiveness of the saints. Here are those who keep, that's a present tense verb, who continue to keep the commandments of God. They don't stop living for Him, and their faith in Jesus. That's trust. How could it be easy to lose trust in Jesus right now? Isn't He your everything? Yeah, and what you're told is His everything as well. And when you're going through what you are and you're losing your jobs, when you're perhaps losing your home, when you're struggling to put food on the table for your family to eat so they don't starve to death, when you're being arrested, beaten, thrown into prison just because you're doing what's right and telling others about the Savior of the world, and when you're seeing those closest to you lose their lives by being fed to lions, by having their heads severed from their bodies, or dipped in wax and erected alongside a Roman highway and burned as a human torch at night, it could be easy to start thinking, I really don't know that He cares about me as much as He claims. These are the ones who, no matter the circumstances, don't lose their trust in Jesus. Verse 13, then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, write, blessed, or supreme happiness is for those. Heard a voice from heaven saying to me, write, blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on. Now you wouldn't think that death would produce maximum happiness. Oh, it does, for those in the right location. Notice not just those who die, but those who die where? In the Lord. You can't even begin to imagine the blessing that Jesus has provided for those who live for Him, and especially for those willing to die for Him, as He did for those individuals. Blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works follow them. My father was maybe a little bit of a workaholic. My dad, he worked 2 full-time jobs. Many of you know, as a minister of the church, was one of those. We had a 40-acre farm, so it seemed like we're always fixing fence and doing things with cattle. My dad never liked to do things the easy way. Everything was the old-fashioned way, and it worked. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it did work. We burned wood as our main source of heat, as did my grandmother. After my grandpa passed away, we would cut all the wood for us and all the wood for her. I would say probably in the neighborhood of 30 loads of wood every year. Now, as a kid, it seemed like the only thing we ever did was work. That wasn't. We played a lot of sports and video games, just like everybody else, and different things too. But it seemed like we just worked all the time. My dad, that guy, I was always afraid, though, if I heard that Dad was going to have a rare day off because of a holiday from his mail route that he ran, because I knew that meant we were going to work. We'd work on Thanksgiving. We would work on Christmas. I mean, it was just work all the time. And in my dad's later years, this guy, he's just Superman. I'll mention this to you. We would, of course, haul hay, like many of you, the old square bales. Everything was the old-fashioned way. And we were so elated the year we got like a 40-year-old hay elevator, that sometimes would work, where you could put the hay bales on and it would carry them up and drop them off, and you didn't have to throw them up into the hay loft. But my dad, he would work all day on the mail route. He'd get home, work from 7 to 4-ish. Get home, we would eat some dinner, and we would go out and we'd start hauling hay in 100-degree heat. You know how that is in the summer. And we would haul hay all night long. Oh, we kids, we couldn't keep our eyes open anymore. And we'd shower and go to bed and sleep until 11 o'clock. So we'd quit at 5:30 in the morning hauling hay. And my dad, he would go shower and get in the truck and head off to go to work. The guy didn't sleep all night, and he'd work all day again. And you know what that's like. The last about 5 to 10 years of my dad's life, I could tell he was worn out from a long life of work. And every second that he wasn't working on this and that, it was given to the Lord and His service. And I felt like I understood for the first time the promise of this verse when he went on to his reward. Blessed are those who die in the Lord, that they may rest. And I got to talk to my dad just a little bit before he passed, and Christina Mahan, many of you know, and she was able to nurse and a member of the church to communicate a message back and forth. But it was so neat to know just how at peace he was. He was ready. He was tired too. But I think of that when I read this verse now. There comes a time that you've given everything you have and you're worn out and you just need a break. But for these people, it's so much beyond what any of us, my dad included, would have experienced. And working all this hard for the Lord. But for them, all the adversity they face, the battles they have to wage, extra on the side just to be able to survive. And to know there's nothing negative in death for them, but everything to be gained. And God will not forget the work that has been done for him. Beatitude number 2. Beatitude 3, blessed are those who watch. Let's read this one together. Chapter 16. Chapter 16 of Revelation, verse 15. Behold, I am coming as a thief. This is not a description of the character of Jesus, but the manner in which he comes whenever he chooses. Often he tells us he comes as a thief what? or when. In the night, meaning unexpectedly, and that's the symbolism there. But listen to this. Blessed is he who watches, who is awake, alert, like the wise virgins, the 5 of them, and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. Now, if you're wondering, well, what in the world does our clothes matter in this conversation, it's actually going to be the next one that will help us out. Look at, in our next Beatitude, chapter 19, Revelation 19, verse 9, that'll help describe, as we look at the previous verses, the significance of the garments here. Verses 7 and 8 of Revelation 19. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her it was granted to be arrayed in the right kind of clothing, fine linen, clean and bright. Not literally. Notice we're told what the meaning of this is. For the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. So those who live in accord with the commands of God are deemed to have the right kind of clothing on. First of all, they are clothed. And secondly, it's in bright white, symbolizing their purity and their preparedness to live with their righteous husband. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're going to find in chapter 1 a description of Jesus clothed like in something fine linen down to the feet. And I don't think it's a coincidence that then we're going to find in chapter 3 with the church in Sardis that those who walk with me in white and have not defiled their garments will be found worthy of me. Look in verse 9, though, the reason for being in this chapter for the 4th Beatitude of Revelation. Then he said to me, write, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. An invitation that's been extended. There's no higher honor at this time in this part of the world for someone to invite you into their home to sit down and to have dinner together. Again, I will say, I know we're not there yet, but in chapter 3, verse 20, you'll find Jesus saying, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me, considered to be the greatest of all honors. But for this one, blessed, maximum happiness is reserved for the one who is invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And the reason for that is the opportunity not only to dine with, but also to be joined in holy matrimony forever with the Lord himself. And he said to me, these are the true sayings of God. Beatitude number 5, blessed are those who have part in the first resurrection. 20th chapter and the 6th verse. Blessed, supreme joy is reserved, and holy, a set-apart existence, much better than all the rest. Blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no power, but they should be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So if there's a first resurrection, there must also be a second resurrection. There are only 2 resurrections that are described in the Bible. And if it's the second, what's the final resurrection? There you go. That's John 5, 28 and 29. The hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice. It's the resurrection of the body. Well, if that's the second and the final resurrection, what's the first? There you go. Romans chapter 6, verses 3 through 5. Do not know that as many of us as were baptized into Christ were baptized into his death? For if we were united together with him in the likeness of his death, certainly we also shall be in the likeness of his resurrection. And you have joy unending attached to you if you've come up with Jesus from that watery grave. And over you, the second death holds no power. Just like there are 2 resurrections in the Bible, there are also 2 deaths that are described. If you don't want the second death to have any power over you, what do you think the second death would be? That's Revelation chapter 21, verse 8. But the cowardly, abominable, murderers, fornicators, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, the unbelieving, shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Death just means separation, and it's the separation from God for all eternity. But if you've been raised with Jesus to live with Him in this life, you don't have to worry about the second death holding any power over you. And actually, when it's all said and done, even the first death will not do so. Beatitude number 6, and we're going to bring things kind of back to where we started here. Blessed are those who keep the words. Chapter 22. The last two are going to be found in this opening. Chapter 22, verse 7. Jesus speaking, "Behold, I am coming quickly." We'll talk more about it when we get there. This could be referring to His judgment at the end of the world, and it could be talking about His judgment on Jerusalem. It's right around the corner. I myself might have a little more leaning toward the latter than the former, but either could be the case, maybe both. Blessed, though, is he who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book. There's blessing to be found as the book opens if you'll just deal with its contents. There's more blessing to be found if you'll listen to and take in what's being stated, and there's supreme blessing to be found if you will put into practice what the words of the telling of the future has to give you in this book. And the last one, Beatitude number 7, chapter 22, verse 14. Blessed are those who do His commandments, continue to do His commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life. Why do you want to eat of the tree of life? What happened when Adam and Eve were partaking of that particular specimen? You eat of the tree of life, and knowledge of good and evil. Yeah. But the tree of life, and you live. Blessed are those who continue to do what He says, because you get to live forever. And you get to enter through the gates into the heavenly city that God has prepared for those who love Him. You want to have maximum enjoyment? You need to understand then the Beatitudes of the Bible, because that's the only way to find them. Jesus teaches about them in the Sermon on the Mount with 8 of them producing new life. He teaches on them as well in the book of Revelation in a time of great difficulty for His followers. And He says, well, you think you're dejected and you have no reason for joy? Let me tell you otherwise. You right now are on the path to find maximum happiness. And that's not just true of these people, it's also true of us. Blessed is he, blessed are those who read, hear, understand, and do. Includes us just as much as it does them. And we can find joy unending in dealing with the contents of this book of hope. For next time, if you will, we're going to get into the text more itself and follow it progressively now. Chapter 1 of Revelation. Revelation chapter 1. Please read all of that. We've memorized verse 1, verse 3. Let's keep going in odd numbers, 5. Let's do 5 for next week. Revelation 1:5, who Jesus is and what He does for us and the power that He holds in this world. Any other comments, though, on the Beatitudes of Revelation? Yes, sir. Yeah. No, appreciate that, Roy. Thanks for that insight. Okay, any others? All right, great. Thank you for your attention today.